You spent 2 decades dealing with all these quote unquote bad guys. If you are somebody in a position of hostagehood, how do you approach it differently, knowing what you know today versus what you knew then?
What I wish I knew then was this concept of being able to observe but not absorb. And what I mean by that is, imagine you're standing on the riverbank and in front of you there's this fast-flowing river with swirling eddies and little white water pockets, and that's emotion. And what happens is we'll get triggered or our hot buttons will get pressed by life and we'll get nudged into the river. And years ago, I would go for a swim. Falling in the river is not the problem. Staying in it, dwelling in the pity party in a disempowering story or meaning that you're giving something, hey, that's down to you. You've got to get yourself out back onto that riverbank and go, right, I need to pause, reset, and now choose a better course of action.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. Here, there's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
This episode is for you today if you are feeling like you are being held back. You feel like a hostage. You're in a hostage of a system that is telling you over and over and over again, guess what? You have to follow our rules. You have to do it this way. You can't be hired because we think that you're overqualified. So I brought in one of the big guns, and his name is Scott Walker. And Scott Walker has spent a lifetime, at least 2 decades, dealing with some pretty snarly people. And they're kidnappers, and they're the bad guys. And what I heard him say on one of his other shows was that kidnappers are just businessmen looking for a great deal. And so what that opens up is the opportunity to really assess how you can negotiate differently, even better, so that you are outside of that hostage situation. Welcome, Scott. I'm so happy that you're here. And I know my audience is like, me too.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me and looking forward to the conversation.
All right, so let's go. All right. So you spent 2 decades, like 20 years, dealing with all these quote unquote bad guys, right? And I want to understand, now that you know what you know now, how, if you are somebody in a position of hostagehood, how do you approach it differently, knowing what you know today versus what you knew then?
Yeah, great opening question there. And I think it's, first of all, it's worth emphasizing that we often, all of us, get emotionally hijacked throughout the course of our day. It's just part of life, right? We're faced with the challenges, whether or not in the workplace, with our kids, social media, whatever it is. And so what I've learned, as you said, over the years, and what I wish I knew then, was this concept of being able to observe but not absorb. And what I mean by that is, imagine you're standing on the riverbank and in front of you there's this fast-flowing river with swirling eddies and little white water pockets, and that's emotion. And what happens is we'll get triggered or our hot buttons will get pressed by life and we'll get nudged into the river.
Nudged?
And whereas years ago,
poked,
pushed, nudged, and years ago I would go for a swim. And it happened on my very first case. I lost my cool, I wasn't grounded, I wasn't centered, and I ended up literally effectively shouting at the parents of this poor hostage because they just weren't listening or doing what I wanted them to do. And I nearly had the shortest career in negotiation as a result. And so what I realized over the years, and just through doing the reps, just through the flying hours, was actually falling in the river is not the problem. Staying in it, dwelling in the pity party, in the disempowering story, or meaning that you're giving something, hey, that's down to you. You've got to get yourself out back onto that riverbank and go, right, I need to pause, reset, and now choose a better course of action. So if I'd only known that 20 years ago, it would have been far more plain sailing than it has been.
Okay. So now that you've laid this out, and thank you, and we're drying ourselves off and all that good stuff, I want to know how we can practice the reps, because nobody wants to be poked and pushed. So do I put myself in more poking and pushing situations so I get better at jumping in and out? How do I do this so that I am building that muscle over time? Because it's easy, as you talked about, those emotional hijacks, they're coming fast and furiously. And it sometimes feels, I know for me and maybe for others, that you're drowning in all of this stuff. So how do you separate out ways that you're not getting flooded with the ways that you're actually moving forward?
Know thyself, that famous quotation, and it's people throw it around as if it's some kind of glib saying. Yet if you can bring more curiosity than assumption to the situation, the person you're dealing with, yourself, because assumptions are just like earplugs. They get in the way of us truly not only listening, but understanding, okay, what is really going on here? Because the assumptions, they instigate biases and everything else and prejudices in ourselves. And so what I say to people, and all the clients I end up working with now, is get curious about yourself. Know what your hot buttons are. Know what the triggers are. Forget trigger warnings. You don't need a trigger warning. You just need to manage your triggers better. Because if you think you're going to go around life with everybody and everything fitting in with the way that you want it in your pretty little world, good luck with that. Life's a challenge, and you know what? Good for that, because it makes you stronger, more resilient, and the whole concept of post-traumatic growth is evident massively in the world of hostage negotiation, where people who have experienced the most stressful, challenging situations in their lives come out the other side actually thriving as a result, because of the way they've been able to reframe and change the meaning. And the secret to this is the practical way people can do this. First of all, you've got to develop an awareness of what is showing up for you and what is going on for you. You then got to acknowledge it. Here's all the A's coming. So you've got to have the awareness. You've got to acknowledge it. You've got to accept the reality for what it is. Not saying you're going to condone or acquiesce or agree with somebody, but you've got to accept where you find yourself. And then above all, something which seems to be in short supply these days is agency. You've got to own it. Have personal responsibility for, right, this is where I find myself. I'm in this situation. There's no point naming, blaming, or shaming somebody else or something else, however justified you feel, because it ain't going to make you feel any better over the long term. And as you said in the point you made, life gives you plenty of opportunities to practice this when the stakes aren't necessarily that high. So when the big decisions, the big stressful, overwhelming situations show up in your life, you're like, I've trained for this. And you can take it in your stride more than allowing that big shove in the back into the river.
Okay. So can you list for us about three or four low stakes practice rounds that we could start doing to prepare for the higher stakes things? Because I personally am I'm ready. I'm ready so that I am building or paving that path, because I know it's coming. I know it's coming. Somebody is going to push back, right? And that's not a bad thing, as you said. So what can I do between now and then?
Okay. The simplest thing to do is to practice this when the stakes are low, i.e. you're in homeostasis, the body's in balance, life is good, 2, 3, 4 times a day, whatever. Just stop, pause. It's about 30 seconds, and we've all got 30 seconds. People say they're double busy. Well, actually, you can still find this time if it's important. Pause, catch a couple of breaths, just tune into what is showing up for you. Usually it's in our body. Usually there's a tension in the stomach or the shoulders. Just notice that. Buy yourself a little time, just a couple of seconds, reset, and then choose wisely, choose deliberately about what you're going to do. Because
I want to ask you an important question. So, like, I'm good with the pause, but what I really would find helpful is there a question or a prompt that you can offer in the 30 seconds?
Yeah, in that 30 seconds, it's feel the feeling and drop the story. And people say, well, what do you mean by story? And how dare you? And it's, well, yeah, but you're making it up, good or bad. It doesn't make any difference, but it's down to you, the story you're giving, as to why you're feeling a certain way. Excuse me. And so in that moment, just notice all these things that we talk about. People want, okay, Scott, what's the 5-step? What's the checklist? I'm like, no, it's more of a mindset than a checklist. If you can come with this, I used to do this on every single kidnapping case, right? Before I'd walk into the room and sit with the family, or we'd jump on the phone with the kidnappers, literally just paused, even if for 10 seconds, right? Just tune in to what's going on for you, and having this sensory acuity, this radar on the top of your head, where you're scanning for the ebb and flow of emotions in the room, and is incongruences between what other people are saying and the energy they're giving off and all of that stuff. And so by doing that, it trains it's like a muscle, basically, your emotional muscle. And so when you do get hit by something stronger, you're like, yes, I knew this was coming and I practiced it, and it doesn't have so much of a hold. And so and then from that, I work on to the next step, which is like I call it the 3-2-1 formula. Okay. And I've learned this the hard way, Lauren, in terms of making mistakes over the years. And the first one is the 3 buckets. Okay. What you can control, what you can influence, and what you can ignore. Most stuff can't really go in what we control. Okay. Yes, we may be able to influence things, but most stuff, we just have to ignore it. And from that place, if we can just work out, okay, this situation, this challenging circumstances, can I control it? Can I influence it? Or do I just have to let it go or let it be? And that can be quite liberating in that sense. And from that place, once you know which bucket it's going to go into, you move on to the second piece, which is something called the second arrow. And this concept has been around for thousands of years, and it works on the premise of pain is guaranteed, but suffering is optional. And what that means is, so you lose a business deal, you go bankrupt, you get divorced, you get sacked, somebody in your family gets an illness, you post something on social media that doesn't resonate, or you make a mistake, even at the low level of stuff, and you feel a bit frustrated or a bit embarrassed, or you're sad or whatever. That's inevitable. It's part of life. Yet the second arrow is what you fire off, and that is the loop, the story, the disempowering negative loop that you then replay in your head, that just reactivates constantly, that enables us to then be hijacked emotionally. It's feel frustrated and disappointed and angry and let down, but actually don't start firing off all these different arrows into yourself as to reinforcing that negative loop. It's pause, take a step back, stay on the riverbank, observe it, allow it to work its way through. And then when you're in that grounded, centered place, then you can ask really powerful questions. And the one aspect of 3-2-1 is choose what you're going to focus on. Focus is your most valuable resource, and we squander it without a second thought. And it's okay, I know which of the 3 buckets. I'm not going to fire that second arrow. I'm going to manage my response rather than some kind of knee-jerk reaction. And then from that place, I can choose, okay, where am I going to place my focus? And that, in my experience, it can help people stay out of the river.
Can you give us some examples that you would identify as second arrows that we can all say to ourselves, okay, so I'm in my second arrow, and help us to catch it before we fire?
Yeah, second arrow could be you send a text message to somebody. Also, you send a text message to somebody, and you can see they've replied, or you sent them an email, you can see they've read it, and they just don't respond for ages. And you maybe, well, this is a really important email or really important message. And then the second arrow would be you starting making stuff up about, or you go to the worst case scenario as to why they're not responding. If you're dating, it's a relationship thing. In the early days, it's, well, who else are they messaging? Well, they read it. So what else are they doing? Are they with somebody else, or they don't like me anymore? Or with the email, it's like, why aren't they responding to me? Do they have a better client, a better deal, a better offer? They're going to change their mind. And so they're just some everyday scenarios as to what could be a second arrow that we fire off that actually that there's no need to. We've just got to focus on what we can control, really.
I love that example, because I think that I must get at least 1, maybe 3, 7 reach outs a day from clients saying, I interviewed yesterday, and I didn't hear back from them today, and I had a great interview, and, they must have fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
And that story, I know we all have a propensity to invite in. And what you talked about earlier, and I want to just link these two, right, is that when you're in the story, you're also pushing out the curiosity, right? You're like, oh God, because that's the story is built on a lot of assumptions, and we don't know what those assumptions are for real, right? Like, you've made those up.
Yeah, and it often goes back to the one thing that is the golden thread in all successful negotiations and indeed communication, no matter what the context, and that's trust. It was the golden thread that enabled me to negotiate with kidnappers in the most unregulated, ungoverned, dangerous industry in the world, which had a 93% success rate of the hostages coming back. Not 100, but 93. I'm going to take those odds. But that was because I spent the time, as did they, the kidnappers, looking to build the trust. If I'm going to hand over some money to them, I need to trust that they're going to look after and hand over the hostages safe and in one piece. And I'm not going to try and kill them. They're not going to try and kill the hostages and run off with the money. All these different worst case scenarios. But it takes time. And that's no different in a business context. If I could do business with you, okay, but if I don't trust you, yes, I might have to do business with you once or twice. But you want people who there's a queue of people outside the door waiting to do business with you because they trust you. And trust is a far greater indicator of success than just the skills in and of themselves. And I'd rather take somebody onto my team or work with somebody in the past who I could trust, even if they weren't necessarily the best at what they could do, because I can train them on the skills. Whereas trust is more of an inherent value, I think, and a trait.
So this is you just set me up so perfectly. Thank you. One of the other quotes that I just fell in love with was, unless you can establish trust, influence, and cooperation, you won't get anywhere in negotiations. So I'm going to ask this crazy question because everybody wants it sooner, faster, harder, more. How can you if trust takes time, is there anything that we can do to accelerate it? What are the ways that we can impart trust so that when we get to that negotiation, that foundation is established?
Quite simply, it's doing what you say you're going to do. In the kidnapping example, it would be if I say I'm going to be available between 2 and 4 p.m. the following day to be on a phone call with them with an update as to what we're managing to do in terms of maybe getting a little bit more money together, I need to be available between 2 and 4 p.m. And likewise, if they promise that on the next call, they're going to put the hostage on to do what we call a proof of life call, and they do that, they're demonstrating a bit more trustworthiness. And if they don't, that's going to raise a bit of a flag as to, okay, well, you said you were going to do this. What means that? Why are you not being able to do that? And so then I'm going to be looking for a bit more evidence or trying to clarify a few more things or test them. From a sales perspective, you effectively test closing all the time. And that's how you establish the trust. Can I trust this person? Are they demonstrating credibility, but also an ability to follow through? And do their actions match the words and their promises? And it's
Every time.
Every time. And if they don't, for whatever reason, they own it. They take responsibility. Go, do you know what? I really messed up there. That's my fault. I'm sorry. I assumed it was going to get done. I overlooked it. I didn't pay attention. Please, what is it you need here from me? Or what else can I do to get us back on track? And actually, sometimes it's a bit like when you break a bone in your body. The place where it heals can be stronger than it was before. And sometimes if you repair a sense of broken trust, depending on what it is, actually you can enhance the relationship even more than what it was before. However, I wouldn't necessarily advise people go out and deliberately breach that trust. But if for some reason it does happen, and at the end of the day, we're human and things happen, just own it, own the mistake, own the error, and do whatever it needs to get back on track.
So I want to have you walk us through how ageism in particular might fit into one of those three buckets, right? Because a lot of executives, I've got 20 years of experience. The experience is what you can control, but the assumptions around it might not necessarily. How do we establish trust that we really can when people are just looking at data points? And how do we overcome those perceptions when maybe people are curious or not? How can we get ahead of it?
Yes, that's a great question, and something which I'm sure is a problem for a lot of people. The reality for a lot of people of a certain age in the workplace. And I think it goes back to you can only control what you can control, i.e. how you show up, how you communicate, how you can best influence other people. Trying to go head to head with somebody, particularly an ego-driven colleague or boss, is you're never going to win a direct confrontation because they would literally, let alone metaphorically, rather die than give you an inch. And so what we have to do there is understand what are some of the underlying factors at play here that are just beneath the surface. Okay, there will be things like status and autonomy and accountability and the role that people play, and are people appreciated? And these 4 or 5 different core concerns, if they're not met, then that can cause some friction and some conflict. And so often the best way to demonstrate that you're a good fit, that you have the credibility, is by demonstrating these 5 core concerns with other people. And the other factor is never underestimate the power of likability. Not wanting to be liked, because that's just external validation, but being likable. And being likable is you bring more curiosity than assumption to your conversation and your relationships with your colleagues. You generally want the best for other people. you can appreciate that, or you take the time to understand what's really motivating and driving these people. Is it to save face? Is it for significance? Is it for control or certainty? What's their status? Is my role as somebody of a certain age threatening the status of somebody else, for example? And I think there's lots of little nuances here at play. And I think it's stay on the riverbank, make sure you can try and reframe the meaning in the situation, the difficulty that's facing. Another thing I'd say is don't be afraid of conflict. Usually people will run away from having difficult, challenging conversations, particularly if we need to call something out. And with Kidnappers, we would call it the conflict call. And it would usually come about calls 2, 3, or 4, where it'd be about expectation management. So the Kidnappers may demand $1 million, for example, and we're going to pay about 100,000. And so our opening offer might be 40, 50,000, for example. And can you imagine the response of the Kidnappers? They want $1 million and we've offered 40,000. It's not going to go particularly too well, but we know that, but we're willing to move towards and have the courage and the conviction and the certainty and the inner calmness to have a direct, candid, kind, but not weak conversation with somebody where we just lay it out. And this is how it is. And most people will avoid having that. But if you can have that, and you can call things out, and you can stand your ground and articulate your points with the things I've just mentioned, it kind of enhances your presence and your value in the workplace.
Absolutely. So I'm going to also turn this over to you to tell us about your book, Order Out of Chaos, and also the programs that you offer, because, this sounds great. This sounds amazing, but I still would not be able to execute this on my own. And so thank you for providing a roadmap and also a structure to do that. So tell us about your book and tell us about that so we can come and find you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, after 15, 20 years of doing this, I realized that having had a ringside seat into the human psychology about what makes people think, feel, and act the way they do, particularly in times of overwhelm and stress and change and conflict, there were themes and patterns that showed up no matter which industry or sector, where in the world, what the geography or culture was, or things that individuals, leaders, teams did that worked really well, and the things that didn't work. And I'm thinking, actually, this applies to all different aspects of business, all different aspects of our personal life. And so I wanted to share that to people, not giving away trade super secret stuff behind the scenes, but everyday tools and techniques that people can apply so they can influence and persuade and communicate and negotiate better and develop a more resilient mindset. And what I say to people is, if you don't think you're a negotiator, think again, because all of us are negotiating every single day, because all it is a conversation with a purpose. And all of us are looking to influence or persuade, as I said, or bring about some kind of cooperation or collaboration with other people. So that's what the book is all about. And it took 4 years to put together. And yet I'm pretty pleased with it. And that's out in the world and is available on Amazon or wherever people get their books. And if people are interested, I'm actually running a 8-week online virtual but live program starting May the 20th, where we'll meet for 90 minutes a week. And I'll take people through all the different steps about what they can apply to their own lives to make better decisions, negotiate better deals, and have better conversations, particularly whilst under pressure in the day-to-day lives that all of us are experiencing. And so people can go to thriveunderpressure.co, and they can register there and look forward to seeing as many people as possible there.
I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm going to be there.
Great.
I want you to all know, if you listen this far, Conflict negotiation is the number 2 in-demand skill in today's hiring market. That's following AI. That's how high up it is in the level of priority. And so I'm going to be at this session starting in May, and I really am encouraging you guys to do the same. Who better to learn it from than Scott? Also, if you like this episode, you know what I'm going to ask. It's the only thing I'm ever going to ask of you, aside from listening, is to please write a Apple Podcast review. I cannot tell you we are in the top 1.5%, but it's only because of you listeners. And so to keep us going and to continue to support this as a way of identifying outdated career advice and offering great solutions, please write that podcast review. We thank you so much. And thank you, Scott Walker, for coming here across the pond, off the riverbank, and just loved our conversation so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next career blast in a half. Most of all, thank you for you.